Hey folks, looks like we're live. Show actually starts a couple of minutes time at the top of the hour. So hey, I'm just here a couple of minutes early to patch in my guest. Looks like we're live. Show actually, bit of feedback, that should be gone now. And yeah, see you in a couple of minutes time. And let's have a good show. Alrighty, cheers. One, two, da, di, da. Oh, seems to be working. Hello. Oh, look at that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We'll be right with you. Hold on. Daily Brexit, live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, coming up shortly. Live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, yes, coming up soon. Daily Brexit. One, two, da, di, da, da. Oh. Oh, seems to be working. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, look at that. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We'll be right with you. Hold on. Daily Brexit, live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, coming up shortly. Live on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. Live at 5, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Daily Brexit, yes, coming up soon. Daily Brexit. Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Brexit. Holding democracy to account, fighting for self-determination, and exposing plutocracy. I'm Olly Connolly, thanks for tuning in. And today's show, the first of our UKIP leadership candidate interviews, John Rees-Evans. I'll be asking John about his bid, his party, his country, his vision. And not a word about that donkey, yeah? This is a serious show. Important times, important questions. Please, throw yours into the ring. Ask away in the comments. We'll get through what we can. And KIP Essentials Reece Coombes will be popping in too at the bottom of the hour, peppering the debate. That's in about 30 minutes. This is the Daily Brexit, just trying to find out what generally the ruddy hell is going on. And here's to us. Okay, oh yeah, that's enough of that, enough of that. And I'm skipping the news section today too. I do, before I start, I do want to throw out a big hug to Mexico and the Caribbean, particularly Puerto Rico. I was hanging out with some lovely Mexican folks last week while I was on the holiday up in Galicia in Spain, and also some Puerto Ricans. I met so many people from all over the world last week, but the people that I hang out with the most were those two groups of folks, and so I've been thinking about them. They're obviously in the news for all the wrong reasons. And as to the rest of the news, I imagine we will cover it pretty extensively with my guest right here, right now. UKIP leadership contender, John Rees-Evans. Thank you for coming on the show, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ollie. Thank you for having me on.
Not at all. Not at all. I guess an easy leading question is, how are you finding this campaign? I'm guessing it's pretty hard work, and the membership does seem somewhat anxious.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. I mean, it's extraordinary what has happened. You know, It's strange to have so many candidates all standing for contention of the leadership, because if there's an even distribution of votes, roughly speaking, there's a possibility that none of us will get our deposits back, and whoever does win is likely to have quite a small mandate. So I'm frankly quite disappointed with the way the system has worked, but one has to do one's best.
I want to ask you about this system, but first of all, you've got a 30,000 membership now for UKIP, as I understand it, nigh on halved since those heady days of Farage. And from a 16% high, UKIP's polling now hovers on peanuts. You had 5 leaders in a year. And I guess, is UKIP a busted flush, or how many lives does it get?
No, I mean, basically, you've got 2 issues. One is how we redefine ourselves with respect to the fact that in many people's minds, UKIP has essentially done the job that it was created to do. And the other issue is you've got a party full of anti-establishment people who, if you like, are fighters, very belligerent, pugnacious people. And as such, these are distrustful people of authority. So it's technically a very difficult party to lead. We're not a bunch of sheep who will just, follow arbitrarily. So if you take a party that ordinarily would have a lot to say against authority and direct these people against themselves, you end up with a lot of infighting. And I think that's what you found within the party. I mean, even when Paul won, it was surprising to me that in spite of having a mandate of something like 63% of all of the members who turned out to voting for him, nonetheless, he struggled really to get the kind of support that one would have expected him to get with a mandate like that to lead. So it is a very difficult party to lead, but not impossible, I think.
Okay, I agree with you. UKIP delivered the referendum. That was your reference, yeah. If you like, it was the wind at our backs to propel us in that direction, and that put us over the finishing line to pressure as was Tory government into giving us a referendum. That job was done. UKIP is going through such an identity crisis. You intimate on the problems which seem to be fairly colossal in terms of the distribution of power being amongst a very few people at the top of UKIP. How can you square this circle? And is there time before, for example, the deadline for the Article 50?
I mean, look, the problems we're having in UKIP are, if you like, a small-scale version of what's wrong with the country as well. See, what I've always contended is that modern representative democracy has failed in the sense that it's not representative. You see, what you have is people who get elected into positions of power on the pretext that once there, they're going to do what the people who elected them to those roles want them to do. The reality is, once they get into those positions, they've got their own agenda that they pursue, and they frankly disregard the will of the people who put them there. Now, you have this in the country, nationally. You've got our MPs in Parliament, and we had clear evidence on the 23rd of June last year that 75% of our elected members of Parliament voted for something that was constitutionally massive, to stay under the authority of a foreign bureaucracy, at the same time that in spite of all of the propaganda going in the opposite direction, the British people voted to leave and to become independent. So you've got a massive democratic disconnect nationally between what the people want and what their alleged representatives are trying to fob them off with. Now, we have a similar kind of situation in UKIP, in the sense that we have people elected into positions of power who subsequently make very little effort to actually determine what is the will of the people, make very little effort to inform them in terms of their options. And Olly, I can give you a perfect example of this right now. We've got 7 people standing for election to the leadership of this party. We've got email addresses on record of 83% of our members, something like 28,000 email addresses. Now, surely, in a democracy, democratic choices are only valid if the people know what it is they're voting for. So why on earth would the party hierarchy not simply send out an email to these 28,000 members saying, look, we're having a leadership election. These are the people. Here are links to all their websites. Please do your very best to get to know these people as well as possible so that you can make an informed choice when you vote for a new leader on the 28th of September. But look what they've done. They deliberately have not used the means they have at their disposal to inform their own members about what their options are. They do their best to hide information from the membership because they want to maintain maximum leverage themselves as the establishment. They want to filter down through the chain of command to the members their way, who ultimately they want the members to vote for. It's a very, very similar situation that you have nationally.
You make it sound like a cabal.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any.
It's basically a concentration of too much power at the top. But isn't it obvious? I mean, we see how aloof the Tories are with their grassroots now. I mean, for example, during that general election, bringing in the idiot dementia tax idea, when all they should have been concentrating on surely was Brexit, which is surely, you know, the government was basically a result of the referendum and Cameron having to fall on his sword. You would have thought that May would purely have run on Brexit in that year. But that aside, we can see that the Tories are aloof from their grassroots. In the case of Labour, it's even worse. They've U-turned on two major policies, two major manifesto pledges, the student fees, and now apparently they want us to stay in the EU for forever and a day. We don't know how long. Can UKIP as a party, the senior guys in UKIP, can they not grasp the message that the grassroots should be where the power is really coming from? And that's what that's what Brexit's all about, for crying out loud. Why is UKIP losing that fact somewhere? Is it not obvious?
Do you know, the question, Olly, is do they really care? You see, there's such a cynicism in modern British politics, or arguably Western politics for that matter. Once people are elected into positions of power, they know that their electorate has such a short memory that they can pretty much get away with anything. And then in the run-up to the next election, all they've got to do is offer the same old empty promises again and again, get elected, and then immediately renege on these promises. Now, it doesn't matter if they're the Conservatives, if they're Labour, it's exactly the same. Politicians are so cynical about their electorate. Look, the Conservatives did it. They promised 3 times successively to reduce immigration below 100,000. It doesn't matter if they're the Conservatives, if they're Labour.
Excuse me, John. Sorry about that. Bit of feedback. Do carry on, please.
Don't worry. I mean, Labour are doing just precisely what the mainstream parties have done, frankly, for at least a generation. Making promises that they know they don't have the power to fulfill, that frankly they don't even have the will to deliver, simply to get themselves elected. Then once elected, they have this idea that they are God's gift to humanity. They know far better than us ordinary, uninformed, ignorant folk. They're the ones who are supposed to tell us what to think, what to say, how to live our lives, and they'll just jolly well do it, regardless of what we have said we want them to do on our behalf. So, I mean, look, the fact is, what I have contended is that it is completely pointless for UKIP to determine what policies are going to make us popular with the electorate. This is what the other 6 candidates who are standing against me are trying to do. They're trying to determine what are going to be popular policies to constitute our platform moving forwards as a political party at national level and to drive those policies. The reality is, all that's going to happen is that as soon as the mainstream political parties can see that we're rising in the polls, they will work out what is the source of our increasing popularity. They'll work out which policies are making people want to vote for us, and they'll simply adopt those policies themselves. And then in the run-up to the next general election, the voter is going to look at UKIP, they're going to look at Conservative or Labour, and they're going to say, UKIP, thanks very much for getting this policy into public discussion. But the reality is the Tories have just adopted this policy themselves. So frankly, I can't justify voting for UKIP because you're never going to form a government. So I'm going to have to vote for Conservatives, because they've got this policy as well, and they've got more chance of actually implementing it. So all that's going to happen with the current pattern is we're going to rise up to 15 to 20% at best. Then before a general election, the other parties nick our policies, the electorate votes for them, and we're smashed down to 2 or 3% at best. Now, what I have proposed is short-circuiting this whole process. Instead of playing their game on their terms, except the difference is we actually mean what we say. We're not just lying to get ourselves elected. Instead of playing by their rules, I am proposing that we actually rewrite the rules of how modern British politics happen. And that is through the implementation of direct democracy.
Okay, I want to ask you about direct democracy. I know that is a very key part of your manifesto, and I want to be asking you a bit more about that. First of all, we've got a couple of comments popped in so far. Hey, hi, Chris Ford. He's watching. God bless you. Steve Richards, I still haven't received my voting form. Yeah, okay. So something's going wrong there. Marty Kane, in a normal political party, the power pyramid has the leader at the top, with power filtering down to the membership at the bottom. In DDIP, we have turned that power pyramid upside down to empower the membership. This is what they need to do in UKIP if they want any chance to survive in British politics. Oh, hold on, my scroll isn't working. Sadly, I don't expect for one moment they will ever allow John's plan of direct democracy to ever be implemented, even if he wins, in my humble opinion. Now, actually, that leads me directly on to my next question to you, which is what you're looking to do, John. It's going to require a change of the UKIP constitution, no? And that, I understand, would require a referendum, which in itself is pricey, but also this could drag on for another year of disunity within the party. Is that not a reason maybe to say, I don't know, maybe we've just got to, I mean, I like the sound of democracy. The more democracy, the better. But on the other hand, at this pivotal time, should UKIP be pressuring the government almost exclusively about Brexit?
Well, look, I mean, Brexit, you've asked a couple of questions there.
I probably did.
No problem at all. I mean, as far as Brexit is concerned, look what happened. We had an act of direct democracy that got us Brexit. That is where the people bypassed their allegedly representatives, and they voted directly on legislation. And that is direct democracy. The problem is this is not actually functional executive direct democracy, because Parliament essentially treated our vote as, in a sense, being advisory. Now, with real direct democracy, what would have happened is that all the details would have been thrashed out in advance. So once we voted, we would actually the very next day be able to implement the legislation necessary to deliver Brexit. So we would have known precisely what we were voting for. We would have had two options. Now, so that deals with the whole issue of Brexit. Right now, we've got a tremendous problem in the sense that we've still got people who don't believe in Brexit. We've got a Conservative Party that is predominantly composed of Remainers who don't want Brexit and who are doing everything they can really to retard the process, while vested interests have the opportunity to make the case to either have a kind of Brexit in name only or no Brexit at all. And some are even trying to find time to push for a second referendum. Now, again, direct democracy is the only way whereby what the people want actually happens, because it's not like we make a suggestion and then the powers that be listen to that and say, well, thanks for your opinion, but frankly, you're wrong. We're going to give it to you like this, and we might give you a little concession here and there. With direct democracy, what we vote for actually happens. Now, in going back, because you did ask about how am I going to implement it?
This is going to take some time.
Yeah, well, I mean, arguably. But look, we've got the election for the National Executive Committee. I don't know if you're probably familiar with how it works, but every year a certain number of the National Executive Committee members comes up to for vote. And I think in November we've got something like 3 NEC members who are standing for re-election or to be replaced. So we've got to send out a paper ballot to all of our members for that anyway. Now, it's a simple matter to send them a proposal to change the way changes are made to the Constitution. Because in our Constitution, it effectively says the only way we can make changes to the Constitution, the kind of changes that would be necessary to allow for the implementation of direct democracy, is if we send out paper ballots to all of the members and we get a 2/3 majority in favour of the motion. Now, doing that on its own, just for one proposal, would cost something like £34,000 or so, I'm told.
Yeah.
Now, since we're already spending the money sending out all of the letters to all of our members anyway, it becomes little additional cost to send out this proposal as well when we do that in November. So no, it's not necessarily going to be a time-consuming process, and it's not necessarily going to be expensive.
It is going to require unity. And my question to you is, just how fractured would you say UKIP will be off the back of this campaign, depending on who wins? And how might you unify the party?
Well, look, Olly, inevitably, when you have something like 18 people standing for leadership within the course of a year,
sure,
and each of those people gets their own little following, and you inevitably fragment the party into so many little pieces. I mean, I still find people who are at enmity with one another over the last but 2 leadership elections because they picked a different side back then. It's incredibly sad.
Yes,
but I mean,
that's right. It is a real pity, is it not, that we cannot, all of us, pull together behind Brexit, whatever political party we support, actually. But sorry, carry on, please, John.
No. I mean, I hate it. I mean, the fact is, when Paul Nuttall got elected, I immediately offered him my support. The fact that I'd stood against him was irrelevant. The moment there had been this democratic expression of the members' will to have him as leader, any kind of contention that previously had existed between me and him, I immediately dropped. And I had hoped that those who had supported me would have done so as well. But instead, I had this bizarre situation where the people who had been loyal to me during the leadership campaign were actually criticizing me for supporting the democratically elected leader of the party. So I fear that there is going to be ongoing fragmentation within the party, or the fragments that exist at the moment will not be completely bonded immediately. We have a new leader, but I would use any opportunity, Olly, including this one, to implore people to please reflect on the fact that we are only going to be effective as a party if we unite. Now, what I am proposing to do, I think logically stands the best possible chance of uniting the party, and that is the transfer of decision-making powers from the hierarchy, from the leadership, directly to the members on any points that don't obviously need an instant decision on something. Now, think about it. If you do that, it becomes quite impossible within the context of a democratic organization like a modern British political party to question the outcome of a democratically taken vote on something. So imagine now you've got various fragments all wanting to pull in a different direction. As soon as we implement direct democracy, all of these people can have their say. They can do their best to persuade everybody else, but at the end of the day, we have the vote, and whichever way the vote goes, everybody has to respect the democratic decision of the party. And in that context, how on earth could people continue to cause strife with each other for their view when the party has spoken? So can you see, Olly, this is the most effective way of uniting the party, by actually quantifying what is the will of the party in a democratic manner.
Would you go so far, let's play a bit of fantasy cabinet. Would you go so far as to invite some of your fellow leadership candidates to would you give them jobs?
Yes.
Anybody in particular? Anybody that you would not give a job?
I wonder if you're very kind of politely hinting at a possible cooperation or lack thereof between Anne-Marie Waters and me, are you, Olly?
Well, I could be. I may very well be. You may well think that. I couldn't possibly say it.
I mean, look. The reality is, can I firstly tell you, Olly, that on a personal basis, I've got tremendous respect for her courage. She's taken a massive amount of flack. She's borne the brunt of a tremendous amount of negative media scrutiny, some of which has been, frankly, very unfair. Okay. Now, obviously, if I thought that she were the best person to lead the party, I would not be standing against her. Oh, Olly, have I just lost you?
No. You're fine.
So,
You're
sorry.
fine. We've had join us, but don't worry.
Oh,
Carry on.
super. I had something flashing on my screen, and I wondered whether I lost you.
Right.
But no. The fact is, what she is pushing for, tackling issues such as the extraordinary injustice of a law to protect young females in this country against being mutilated, that's been on our statute books since 1985.
FGM.
In excess of 5,000 complaints about it every year, and not a single conviction. I mean, it doesn't matter what your politics is. If
Beggars belief.
Yeah, if you believe in law,
a liberal society.
Yeah. How is it that nobody has ever successfully campaigned towards just even a handful of convictions that put the fear of God into these people who want to, ride roughshod over law and order in this country? It's completely unacceptable. And so the fact that she's sticking her neck out and pushing for things like this, the fact that she's got the courage to tackle issues like grooming gangs, where our police don't really want to venture into these regions for fear of...
Again, incredible. No-go areas, incredible. Acid attacks not being reported for years, incredible. Exactly. All of that.
Exactly.
So you sound... okay. So why is it that Anne-Marie Waters has... There's been a bit of a stink surrounding her candidacy. Has it been more about the people that she surrounded herself within her campaign? I mean, do you feel that you could work very closely with her, that you have pretty much the same things in common, or do you think that there are some, maybe her priorities are slightly wrong, for example?
Well, yeah. I mean, to be perfectly frank, having said everything I've said with respect to her courage and her sincerity and all that kind of thing, understandably, I have certain criticisms. One is that, and again, I hope you have the opportunity to invite her on. So if my
yes, absolutely, and all of the candidates, yes, indeed, and they've all been invited and will be invited again. Yes, John, carry on. Sorry.
So if what I'm saying is unfair or in any way unrepresentative, I apologize in advance. But it is my understanding that she feels that if I were to say, for example, that not all Muslims are problematic, that I'm somehow being politically correct or something. I mean, Olly, I've employed, I don't know, getting on for about 300 Muslims who have worked for me in the past, and they have been, on the whole, tremendously decent, honourable people who have been reliable and hardworking. And I mean, wherever I go, I'm dealing with sincere Muslims. We're not talking about fake Muslims who don't read their Quran or who are only nominal Muslims. We're talking about people who pray, I don't know, 5 times a day or whatever it is they do, and they read their Quran. Not just kind of cultural Muslims who happen to be born in a country which is predominantly Muslim. Now, the irony here, Olly, is that I've hosted a website called messageformuslims.org.uk, where for 12 years I've hosted this website. And the purpose of this website is to really expose the dangers of Islamic theology. From a Christian perspective, I'm an old-fashioned Anglican, Olly, and so theologically I've got tremendous issues with aspects of Islamic theology. Their attitude towards people who are apostate, as they see them, who have been proselytized into another religion, is frankly extremely concerning. And I advise people to Google it and see what their attitude is in situations like this. I've spoken to apostates who fear going back to their families because they believe that their families may be allowed to kill them because they're apostate. Now, it may be oversimplistic, or maybe I've misunderstood, or maybe they're just going to lose their job or have some violence done against them. But the treatment of apostates is tremendously concerning. But at the same time, Olly, I cannot I cannot possibly countenance a position that says that we have to, per se, have an antagonistic attitude towards Islam per se. And let me qualify that, simply because, as a Christian, if I went into a country that was predominantly Muslim, I would expect them to accord me a certain degree of liberty and respect to follow my conscience and to practice my own religion. Now, if I went into that country, let's say with my wife, if I went to Saudi Arabia, I would tell my wife, look, darling, we're expected that you cover your knees here and your elbows and whatnot. And this is their country, it's their culture, their customs, their laws. So could we please respect that fact. Okay. But if then we wanted to go to a local house church or whatever we're allowed to have there and have a church service on a Sunday morning, I wouldn't expect to be attacked. I would expect to have that kind of liberty when visiting their country. So I have the same attitude towards Muslims in this country. Britain has a Christian constitution. It doesn't matter whether you're religious or not. The fact is, Christianity is inextricably linked with our legislature and our constitution. And as a Christian country, Christianity has special protections, has a special significance in law. But notwithstanding, we are a libertarian country. Our constitution actually, it is a libertarian expression. And so people coming into this country need to be allowed to practice their own religion, provided that practice does not require them to...
It has to be said, John. It has to be said. There are a lot of folks, religious or not, who would like to see the separation of church and state, and may just be a little concerned to hear. Do you want to? Well, I mean, for example, what we've got at the moment is whatever. I mean, it's truth. Hey, yes, we were brought up in the Anglican tradition, and I think it's pretty fair to say that that's been the case in the UK for 500 years. We are now seeing, though, Sharia courts working across the UK, about 100 of them, which a lot of people would say are basically pretty misogynist, or can be, depending on how fundamentalist the individuals are that are running those courts. How much of a concern is that for you?
It's a huge concern because it puts into the mind of adherents of Islam the fact that they may subscribe to a parallel legal system, which is completely unacceptable. There is one perfectly adequate, comprehensive system of law in this country, and there is no space or scope available for any competing legal system. Sharia law, to my mind, must be limited only to ecclesiastical functions. They can govern how they conduct their services in mosques and that kind of thing. But where Sharia comes into conflict with British law, it absolutely has no legitimacy in my mind. And I think we need to be far less politically correct in actually rooting out these attempts to impose Sharia law from within the Muslim community.
I'm going to bring in some reader comments before I bring in Reece. Sam Jane Pearson, Neil, with JRE, you'd get... Oh, sorry. With JRE, you'd get Anne-Marie Waters as well, because he will work with her, the others won't. Teresa King, JRE has the right balance where Islam is concerned, as long as Islam is not doctrinated onto young minds of our children. Mighty Kane, so why aren't BNP, Liberty GB and Britain First not polling high? I'm torn between JRE and AMW, says Neil Farrer. Sam Jane Pearson, we need to unite behind DD and our members' voices. We need JRE. You're getting quite a lot of support on here, actually. I think she would poll really high. I guess that's about Anne-Marie. I get a little more demotivated every time I send an email out to over 50 people asking for help and get no one turn up. It's soul-destroying sometimes, says Nicole Bushill. I think about basically the party pulling together. Marty Kane, Anne-Marie Waters is right in what she says regarding FGM, Sharia law, etc. However, her approach to addressing those problems are totally wrong. If she were to become the next leader of UKIP, then it would forever poll alongside BNP and Britain First, and this is no good to anyone. Anyone who cannot see that really does not understand British politics. What would you say to Marty Kane, John?
I'm afraid he's right. The fact is, the British people are incredibly fair. I mean, look, Olly, I've had 31 international relocations throughout my life. I've lived in many different countries under many different cultures. And coming back to Britain, there are some things that are really clear about the British people, and they don't like extremism. They're incredibly fair. They're incredibly warm towards other people coming into our country. And although Anne-Marie Waters she's tapping into something which could be very constructive in terms of engaging the kind of people in politics who feel very badly underrepresented at the moment, because their cause requires people to be not very politically correct and sticking their necks out and fighting for them. So I think that is thoroughly positive. But with Anne-Marie Waters leading our party, unfortunately, it would be characterized as predominantly an anti-Islam party. And I think that would be almost inevitable. And let me even say, it need not necessarily be attributed to Anne-Marie Waters that would be the case. But inevitably, that would be the case. Politics is so much about perception, and that is the way our party would be perceived. Now, if we stood predominantly as an anti-Islam party, at best, we'd simply be a pressure group. And at worst, even if a lot of people in this country sympathized with the main campaigns that we were pushing for, to do with halal, to do with FGM, to do with Sharia, nonetheless, they would be very, very nervous about having any association with us for fear of looking like they were anti-Islam themselves. I mean, the reality is, so much of the work that we need to do is actually to help people within Muslim communities, particularly those who are subject to indoctrination through funding of mosques from countries like Saudi Arabia.
I was going to ask you particularly about that. I mean, would you allow that funding to take place?
No, I wouldn't. In fact, I've written clearly in one of my manifestos that I will be opposing the funding of mosques from Saudi Arabia. I express it in more general terms, but specifically, yes, I would be opposing the funding of mosques from Saudi Arabia. But you see, Olly, in order for us to counter radicalism, dangerous radicalism that results in acts of terrorism in this country, we actually need the cooperation of moderate Muslims within mosques working with us. When I say we, I mean, the British government and all those who are working together to combat radicalization in this country. And if UKIP becomes an overtly anti-Islam party, we will inevitably isolate and marginalize every Muslim. It's going to be impossible for a Muslim to be a member of our party, because even if that Muslim respects Anne-Marie Waters, understands what she's fighting for, the overwhelming public perception of what we stand for is going to make life impossible for a Muslim to go on being a member of this party. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. I want to bring in Reece Coombes, our UKIP stringer. God bless him, from kippercentral.com. Reece.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, mate.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, very, very well. We wanted to do this as much as we can in collaboration to try and get the word out with all the leadership candidates. And so, Reece, please, fire away, mate.
So, to start with, I think it's only right that I say I have voted, and I did vote for JRE. So that's where I'm coming from. Not a problem. So,
right, okay, that has just completely ruined his credibility as a journalist. Okay, fine, fair enough. Look, my affiliation, I will not be telling anybody. Yeah, okay, my UKIP stringer did, but fair enough. Yeah, you're your own. You are your own man, Reece, and we love you for it. Okay, why did you vote for JRE?
I voted because I think the main pull for me was actually UKIP Connect. Because the biggest problem I have is getting people to do things, and being if I do something in my branch and I need someone that does one thing, say build a website or some, obviously I can do that, but if there's something that needs doing that I can't do and there's no one else in my branch that can do it, it doesn't get done, even though someone in the next branch might be amazing at it. And I think for me, that is what UKIP needs, a way of bringing together people from all across the country and the regions to work together on common tasks, because that will just make everything so much more streamlined.
Anyway. What questions do you have for Mr. Rees-Evans, sir?
Well, firstly, what drew you in? Obviously, we all know you're very keen on it and you've got lots of ideas about it, but where did you first discover it, and why? What way for you?
Olly, he broke up a little bit. I don't know if the signal was...
He's asking you, where does your passion come from?
Oh, right. Okay. So what, my passion to serve the party, or my passion to push direct democracy?
Reece?
For direct democracy, where did you kind of come across it, and what bought it, essentially?
Okay. Well, I mean, the fact is, I didn't even know there was such a thing called direct democracy when first I thought of it. Now, obviously, I didn't invent it. It's been there since the 13th century in Switzerland. I mean, we've got two groups in Europe. I think one might be defunct now, you know, the ADDE, which is the Alliance for Direct Democracy in Europe, and the whatever the other one is called. So, of course, it's been something that UKIP has had some kind of association with for a long time. But frankly, I am so much against this concept of elitism, where you've got these people who get themselves into positions of power and then think they know best. They've got this contemptuous, condescending attitude that they know better than us ordinary people, and want to impose their will, their supposedly superior intelligence on all the rest of us. I am so against that concept that I was strolling around in my kitchen thinking, how can we deal with this? And the idea came to me, we need to have a system whereby instead of people voting for people to guess at best how we want them to vote on our behalf, why on earth don't we just cut out the middleman and go directly? You know, it's like in business. I used to be a middleman. I used to have, as before I retired, of course, and I used to have clients who contacted me.
You retired? You look far too young to have retired.
Well, no. I mean, I retired so that I could concentrate on the stuff I'm doing now. I mean, I retired just before standing for Parliament. Yeah. So anyway, previously I had clients telling me, you know, John, can you organize this for us and that and the other? I made note of everything they wanted. Then, of course, I contacted the supplier, the ground operator, and said, okay, I've got these clients and I'd like you to do this and that for them. But things kept going wrong, because they had a kind of a filter, and maybe they wanted to cut corners, didn't want to spend as much money as it would take to do things. And of course, we were splitting the margin two ways. So whatever profit there was to be made, each of us had only half the incentive to do the job. So I thought, well, there's no point. Why don't I just set up my own operation, cut out the middleman and do it directly? So I can guarantee pretty much that when a client contacts me and says, John, we need you to do this, we're relying on you to do it, I could be absolutely sure that everything was within my own control to deliver. Now, the same concept occurs to me about legislation. About
I was going to ask you, because you can take this onto a national standing as well as a party process. Exactly. Choosing legislation, like the Swiss model, no?
Yeah, well, even better. What we will achieve, God willing, is going to be substantially superior to what the Swiss are doing. You see, the Swiss have a system which stems back to the 13th century. And so the protocols, if you like, that they are running are based on very old technology. Whereas doing it now, with all of the technological advantages that we have in the 21st century, we can implement an incredibly sophisticated system that's not even low cost. We can actually make profit. The country can make profit by running direct democracy. But I won't bore you with the details of that. But the fact is, we now have a means of determining what the people want in every respect. Every single bill that passes through Parliament, we have the means to determine how everybody in the country who is eligible to vote would want the government to vote. Okay. If you look, Olly, at our origins of representative democracy, it makes sense. In the 18th century, it made sense that MPs would have meetings in their hometowns or cities, work out what the people wanted them to do, and then go on a horse, I don't know, 2 or 3 days to Westminster and thrash it all out there in Westminster and make decisions on push for things that they thought that the people in their communities wanted. That was the best way you could do it. It was understood to be an approximation of democracy because technology didn't afford any superior method. In this day and age, when we have the ability instantly to canvass the views of millions of people, there is no excuse in sticking with 18th century technology. The reason we have not driven democracy forward in this country is not because we don't know how, it's because there is no political will. And the reason there is no political will is because our MPs love their power. They don't want to give it up. They don't want to be the servants of the people. They don't want their role to be merely to ascertain what is the will of the people. They're supposed to be there to serve and to ensure that that is executed. They want that deliberate disconnect. They want that filter so that they can do what they think is best. They can answer to vested interests. They can answer to the party line. They can answer to their whips.
Reece, does that satisfy you? I kind of assume it does.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. What is really, it shows the feeling of this, I think, in a lot of UKIP members, but also in a lot of the public, that more representation is needed, but in a new way, because we've done it this way, we've done it that way, and it doesn't work. And I think that's something that, in fact, that kind of links to my next question, which is, obviously, there's a lot of members of UKIP who do want direct democracy, but equally, there's a lot who don't. So what would you do in the event that you held the referendum on direct democracy, but the members actually voted against it? How would that? I know it's probably unlikely, but if it were to happen, what would your?
Do you have any idea what the percentages might be, Reece? And what sort of support there would be for and against amongst the grassroots?
I believe it has to be 2/3 to vote for. I might be wrong, but I believe that has to be 2/3 for a constitutional
That's your
change.
Understanding.
Yeah. Yes.
John. Go on.
Yeah. No, that is my understanding as well, that by a paper ballot, there have to be 2/3 of the members who participate voting in favour. Now, of course, it would be frankly absurd if you asked people in a democracy, would you like your democratically expressed will to be responsible for determining outcomes, or would you like somebody else to guess what you think on issues and vote on your behalf? However, I concede that it may be possible. If the result of that vote is that the members of the party don't want to cut out the middleman, they don't want the power to make decisions themselves directly, logically, I would conclude that the reason for their reticence is their fear of, technical issues and potential abuses and hijacking and infiltration and all these kinds of things. So if the vote went against me, I would simply conclude that I had more work to do to assuage the concerns of our members and to explain to them in greater depth how I was proposing to deal with the concerns that they had raised. But I mean, even if they do not vote in favour of the expressed democratic will of the members being responsible for making decisions within the party, nonetheless, it will still be, as I understand it, within my remit to implement a system that allows people to volunteer their opinion on things. And so even if the members don't particularly want to have authority to make decisions, nonetheless, we will still ask them what their positions are. And if
I think we've covered direct democracy pretty well. Reece, have you got any other questions that you want to chuck in?
Well, my laptop is just about to die, but I can ask another question before it does.
Go on.
So, how long do you actually plan on being leader for? Do you plan on it being 18 days? Do you plan on it being a year? Or what? Do you have a plan? Or do you just going to see how it goes? And also, in that time, how big do you envisage UKIP's success could be to win an election with you as leader?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So firstly, in terms of how long, well, as long as the members want me. One is elected for a 4-year term. So obviously I'll be kind of trying to get everything done that needs to be done well within that time. But the reality is, once we've got direct democracy, the contents of my brain become progressively less significant, because we now have a means of harnessing the wisdom and knowledge and experience of the entire party. So once we have that system, once we have all of the members getting involved in decisions and raising ideas about what we should be campaigning on and how more effectively to achieve the objectives that we're committed to as a party, the amount of work actually increases, because the capacity of the party to achieve increases. So it's not simply a matter of me implementing these 5 programs, UKIP Connect, UKIP Direct, Affiliate, Local and Media. I expect to be able to implement those within the first few months after becoming leader. But once all of these things are working together, like UKIP Connect, Olly, Reece was saying UKIP Connect is a strong driver. That's
basically the networking arm that you're looking to implement within the party, yeah?
That's right. And the means of identifying the talent that exists within the party and developing it and making members kind of interdependent. So rather than everybody having to refer everything to head office and send emails that don't get answered, and that's through no fault necessarily of the hierarchy. There's a limit as to how many emails they can answer. I fear people have sent me emails that I still haven't managed to answer. But I want to resource the party in such a way that when they have a great idea, they can publish that idea and other members can get back to them and say, look, I want to help that. I believe in what you're doing. I can help you. And they can look at each other's profiles. They can see where their skills are. They can see where they're missing skill sets, and they can search on a Google map in this website, and they can find the people who have the skills that they're missing.
And your argument that essentially at the moment the party is being mismanaged. It's the resources are not being pulled together for constructive use, cooperative use. Really, that's what you're suggesting, yeah?
Yes, but that's not a really critical indictment of anyone in particular. Just the fact is, we've kind of made it up as we've gone along. We're a very new party that was essentially focused on one aim, and the professionalization and the efficiency of the party, and running it more like a business that's actually trying to make profit rather than just exist and not get done over by the Inland Revenue for not paying its taxes and that kind of thing, has never really been.
That is another thing that you're looking to do, isn't it? Because one of the problems that UKIP has is funding, and I understand that you're looking to reform that as well. How would that work?
In a number of ways. Okay, firstly, I have written a strategy which I think will substantially increase our funds, called UKIP Affiliate, which is where, for example, business owners will agree to sign up to a directory and they'll negotiate a discount that they offer members, and half the value of the discount that they offer will accrue to the party and half to the buyer. So there'll be motivation on the part of the buyer to use a UKIP-owned business for 2 reasons. One, he saves a little bit on the overall cost of the service, but also he knows that, let's say, 5% of all the money he spends goes towards party funds. And that, of course, is going to incentivize business owners to join UKIP, and, of course, to want to network within the party. And the more networking you have, the better, the more money that's spent between members, the more money we accrue. And also, if business owners are joining, then it's very likely that those that they influence within their companies will also want to join. And that is one funding strategy. But the fact is, even without UKIP Affiliate, I would expect us to substantially improve our funding situation, because up until now, there has not been a compelling reason for a sympathizer to actually become a member. I can tell you, Olly, I've never voted for another political party in my life. I've supported, in principle, everything that UKIP has done pretty much since the early 1990s, even from its very inception. Since a teenager, I was a strong constitutionalist, but I never became a member of UKIP until 2014. And I only became a member in order to stand for election. So there are.
Why was that? You got so fed up with the two main parties, or?
Oh, no. I mean, look, I supported UKIP all my life. I tried to serve in various ways. I've always wanted to serve my country in one way or another. And in the end, I was just kind of drawn to politics because I could see solutions that were, I think, deliberately not being capitalized on because of a lack of political will. Everything was kind of tending towards direct democracy. At the time, I wouldn't necessarily have expressed it in that way. I would have said I was anti-establishment. I'd have said I was pushing for greater democratization in the process of British politics. But retrospectively, all the time I was steering towards this end of implementing direct democracy nationally in this country to take away authority from corrupt, callous elites operating from behind closed doors and delivering that authority into the hands of the British people, where the constitution of this country demands that it properly belongs. So, I mean, this is why I got involved in UKIP in the first place. But the point I was trying to make, Olly, is that even somebody like me, who was never interested in another political party, who only ever supported UKIP, was not a member of the party until I absolutely had to be, because I didn't need the Independence magazine. That was not a strong enough reason to become a member. Now, I think right now there are a lot of people who support what we're doing. They want to see us do well and succeed, but they don't have a compelling reason to join the party. Now, once we have direct democracy, those on the outside, sympathetically looking in, will want to join because they will actually be able to have a say in the future direction of the party. They'll be able to promote issues that are important to them. With UKIP Direct, it's not just about national policy proposals. It's also about local campaign initiatives or national campaign initiatives. Everybody has a reason for being involved in politics. There will be people who care about the fact that our pensioners get such a raw deal and there is very little kind of support structure in place to help them. They will then be able to see.
Fair enough. I see that. But also, could you not argue that it could be a little bit like what happened with the Labour Party with Jeremy Corbyn? According to the Labour moderates, a whole bunch of people joined so that they could vote for Corbyn. Could it not be that UKIP could be hijacked in a similar way? What sort of safeguards would you have for that?
I'm glad you asked that question. The proposal that I gave to Paul Nuttall, I think on the 28th of March, when he asked me to go meet with him in London to talk about implementing direct democracy in the party, and of course that came to a dead end when he stepped down after the general election, the proposal had a prerequisite. And that prerequisite was that we must modify UKIP's constitution such that no policy proposals could be entertained that militated against our established core values as a party. So, put another way, we need to change our constitution and write a paragraph or two into it that will prevent any possibility of infiltration, because if somebody from Labour joins up and proposes something which completely goes against our core values as a party, it will be rejected before it even gets to phase one. And they'll be asked, please read the jolly constitution, rewrite your proposal and send it back for reconsideration. So infiltration is not really significant with respect to the fact that nothing can be proposed that militates against our established core values.
What about if we're going to be asking people potentially to vote for legislation on a national level? I mean, obviously, this is the ultimate pipe dream for you. Yeah. But pipe dream, maybe that's unfair. But maybe as a part of a coalition government down the road to kick things up the parochial. Presumably, we need, and presumably you would agree, that we absolutely need to start teaching civics again at school. What do you think is the state of mind of the average voter that's coming out of university these days? And do you feel that they are missing something, or do you think that we're missing something? The rest of us, the older generation, because there does seem to be a big disparity and a huge disparity between, if you like, old and young and what they believe for various different reasons.
Olly, on a personal level, I don't even send my own 3 children to school. Now, we've got a number of reasons for that, but principally, I believe that modern British education has been hijacked by Marxists, essentially. I see modern British education, sadly, as a kind of a Marxist indoctrination program. Now, a lot of people manage to survive that. Sometimes they're scarred psychologically for a few years and end up voting for parties like Labour until they see sense in their mid-20s. But the fact is, it's very damaging, and we need to tackle this issue of the hijacking of our education in this country. But I think to answer the question more broadly, if we're going to have people voting directly on legislation, and some of these people are indoctrinated by a system to think in a certain way politically, that is potentially dangerous. And the outcomes we're going to get, are potentially unacceptable. I mean, this is not my argument. This is the argument that I'm addressing. This is the question that I'm answering. Well, the fact is, Olly, in a democracy, the valid outcome is that outcome which genuinely reflects the will of the greatest number of people who are eligible to engage in the process. It is our job as campaigners to present the arguments persuasively. We can't say, because there are some people who have been brainwashed, we can't trust the ordinary people to make good decisions, and therefore we need to lobby and meet behind closed doors and bribe legislators with expensive dinners and pay their wives consultancy fees for doing nothing in particular. We can't be like these elitists who have this contemptuous attitude towards the ordinary people and who allege that the ordinary people don't know what they're doing and are not qualified to make decisions on their own behalf. We did it with Brexit, didn't we? We had a brainwashed population where the government had spent 14 million of taxpayer money, and where for a generation they'd hijacked the education system to teach children that coming out of schools and universities that the EU is a wonderful organization and anyone who opposes it is evil. They'd been through all of that, and we still won, because in the end, common sense will prevail. They will not be able to fetter us. They will not be able to muzzle us. If we really believe in what we are doing, we will campaign with more zeal and passion and drive than anybody else. Truth in the end will always be victorious. So when we are pushing for legislation, it will be our job to look at that legislation and to explain in simple terms the ramifications of voting one way or another. But I mean, Olly, can I don't know how much time we've got. I see I've taken about an hour.
We've got about 10 minutes. I just want to say, I know a lot of folks are going to leave and watch Farage, and good on you. Fair play. Listen to Farage. I would too, but just another 10 minutes here. But guys, go. Yeah. You can always check out the archive of this. And thanks for joining in. Thanks for your comments, fantastic comments. I notice actually we've got a lot of Pendragons in the comments tonight, and we did have Graham Moore and Stephen Lang on Daily Brexit a few weeks ago, and they were awesome, telling us waxing lyrical about common law. What do you know about common law, out of interest, John?
Well, I mean, look.
How much is it true? What would you say? Do you sympathise with the idea that our rights have been steadily eroded by stealth and perhaps even illegally?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, Olly, the thing is, I contend that even our membership of the European Union was an illegal act of treachery. I still maintain that the Constitution has to prevail over any kind of legislation that Parliament tries to implement. I mean, it says in our Bill of Rights, no foreign prince, person, prelate, state, or potentate hath or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence, or authority within this realm. That's in black and white in our Constitution, and I don't believe there is a constitutional lawyer in this country who would deny that that is still valid law. And
would you agree in that case that Ted Heath was a traitor and his cabinet?
Yes. Without a moment's hesitation. Yes, they capitalized on the ability to hijack democracy and the fact that it is not relevant for ordinary people to understand law, because ordinary people have little opportunity to engage in the legislative process beyond voting on the basis of lies every 4 or 5 years. So where the ordinary British people don't know what the laws of their land actually compel their politicians to do, you can get away with anything. And our membership of the European Union, even the 1972 European Communities Act, was a flagrant disregard of our constitution, was completely illegal. And I contend that there are grounds for looking at the application procedure and for potentially suing the European Union for fraudulently giving our country access to the European Union or even the common market, arguably, without first ensuring constitutional compatibility between our country and the European Union. Because in very, very simple terms, it is illegal. It has been illegal since 1688 for our country to be subject to any foreign jurisdiction. And with our membership of the ECA and EU, our country is incontrovertibly subject to a foreign jurisdiction.
John,
okay.
Adding to what you said a minute ago about education with the EU.
Whoa. Oh, sorry, Reece, carry on. I didn't know you were still there. Hey, go on, Reece.
Yeah, sorry. It crashed, but it worked again. So
Good on
I don't know. I mean, I'm actually a student, obviously, so I'm experiencing this firsthand.
Yeah.
And I always remember a couple of years ago, my planner, my little kind of diary we got, there was a page that said the European Union, and it had all the statistics about how much trade it gives us, how much money they give us, how much extra, I don't know, all these figures that none of us even understood, but there were these big numbers that the EU gave us and did for us. And at the time, I thought, great, that looks great. And I remember during a referendum, I thought, I'm going to have a look at that page, and I researched it, and every single one of them was either a lie or was a very, very clever playing of words, because it was very blatantly not what was actually going on. And that's not just in the books. That's what the teachers are saying. That's what the kids are saying because they've been taught it. And there's a culture within education. This isn't a dig at any teachers personally, but in general, in education, there is the atmosphere that the European Union is wonderful and anyone who wants to leave it must be mad. And I think that's something that UKIP obviously have been picking up on, and something that UKIP must continue to pick up on. And so, I mean, I guess my question for you, well, I suppose you've already answered it on this area, but I mean, what more could we do, like to actually, in education, what can we actually do to change the culture?
Well, I mean, thank you so much for vindicating what I said about modern education. And I don't mean to have a go at any parents who put their children through the education system. I mean, it's rare for people to have the opportunity to find an alternative. And I mean, it's tremendous, Reece, that you've been through this brainwashing attempt by a usurping state, and yet you've emerged actually knowing the way things really are and having the ability to argue your case convincingly and persuading people to come around to a correct way of thinking. But what we could be doing is actually telling parents what we are teaching children in schools. We could actually publish the guidelines for the syllabus that our children are subjected to, and ask parents whether or not they want to opt in or opt out of those modules. There's a sense in modern Britain that parents no longer own their children. I mean, who's to say anyone can actually own a person? But the state behaves as though the children are the property of the state with regards to what they learn and what they're allowed to do. And this is something that UKIP has to combat heavily. I mean, for me, it is utterly outrageous, the kind of thing that happens in Scotland. I know it was defeated, but it nearly happened with children having to report to a guardian, and that guardian essentially having authority over the parents, and that guardian having the ability to sanction the parents if the parents weren't doing what the state wanted them to do to these children. I mean, this kind of thing makes me so angry. I barely have words to explain. UKIP really, really needs to take the battle to the establishment on this front. It is completely unacceptable that the state should any longer be allowed to function in this way as though it owns our children.
I want to ask you just a few very, very quick bullets, just to get an idea of your thoughts on some wider policy issues. So, yeah. For example, underlining some of the stuff that we've been talking about today, a lot of folks, have read about Coudenhove-Kalergi, his plan.
Yeah.
Do you buy that there has been an enforced homogenization of European culture with outside interests, basically to confuse the hell out of us, so that we'll basically be controlled, ruled?
Olly, all I can say, because of course I don't know what actually goes on behind closed doors, but all I can say is it would not surprise me if there were actually a systematic move in place to achieve the objectives of the Coudenhove-Kalergi plan, and all evidence seems to point in that direction. That's as much as I can really say on it.
How dangerous would you say is the Bilderberg group, for example?
Incredibly dangerous, because with the Bilderberg group, you have precisely what I am opposing. You have the arrogation of power into the hands of progressively fewer and fewer people, until in the end, the agenda of a small elite who have completely, in most cases, lost empathy with the ordinary people, and whose decisions and motivations are driven predominantly by profit and the desire to gain more and more power and money. You have decisions made by a group like that being disseminated right down through the chain of command within industry and government. I would remind you that in 2013, when they had the Bilderberg meeting at the Grove in Watford, and I know because the head of hospitality is actually a close friend of mine. I bought a property for him next door to me in another country. So he told me he was there, and he told me about what went on. Attending there were, as well as the heads of places like Deutsche Bank and BP, as well as Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, were people like George Osborne and Ed Balls. They go there. They suck up to all of these elites. Yeah,
Cameron
I think
refused to release the minutes with Kissinger, didn't he? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I think that is correct. They go in there, they suck up to these elites, and these elites just use them to disseminate an agenda that they want for the country for the next 365 days down through them into government. This is how decisions are made. This is why representative democracy doesn't work. Because when you get elected, look, Olly, somebody who joins the Labour Party, they may have a genuine desire to serve the people around them. They may genuinely want to confront injustice and wrongdoing. And that may be why they get involved in politics. They get elected for pure motives, arguably. They join the Labour Party, and then instead of voting the way they think, instead of pushing private members' bills that essentially prosecute an agenda that is in line with why they got into politics in the first place, they find themselves being told what to vote on, being told what talking points to push. And these talking points are disseminated down to them ultimately from nasty little meetings of these elitists sitting behind closed doors in places like the Grove, with these Bilderbergers. This is how the whole system works.
The Grove in Watford. Plutocracy, no? Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Another question. Do you trust the motives behind the war on terror, or even the official 9/11 account, which instigated what Bush called for the day after the attacks? In his official address from the White House, he called for a crusade. Do you trust the motives behind the war on terror?
Well, Olly, you're really trying to get me into trouble here, aren't you? Happily, you're probably going to cut me off in a moment. But the fact is, okay, I'm extremely cynical about government. If government is telling me one thing, I'm inclined to more likely believe the opposite of what they want to get me to believe. So when a president says immediately after some big terrorist attack, whatever we do, we mustn't listen to conspiracy theorists, I'm inclined to think, oh, that's interesting. What are the conspiracy theorists saying? Okay, now, I don't know what happened on 9/11. I haven't got a clue, honestly. But what I can tell you...
It was the day that changed all of our lives, was it not?
Yes, yes. I mean, always kind of follow the money. Always look who stands to gain most from these things. Okay. And what I can tell you is that I'm not a scientist, but I can just tell you that I have tremendous difficulty understanding how easy it is to knock a building down into its own footprint by crashing an aeroplane into it. And if that was an amazing piece of skill, to then do it 40 minutes later on another building, and then to somehow cause vibrations in a third building that you didn't even bother crashing an aeroplane into, which fell into its own footprint as well, I just find quite extraordinary. But honestly, Ollie, I don't know what's behind all of these things, but I am very, very cynical about them. And I do know it is an established fact that governments leverage the Hegelian dialectic. If they want to implement a plan that there is not yet sufficient public will for, they kind of guide people towards wanting that plan by maybe facilitating events that need to happen in order to create what I think is often called a helpful wave of indignation amongst the people. I think that terminology precisely in those terms was used in a document, I think written for presentation to President Kennedy, I think a year before he was killed, when trying to deal with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
That's right. That is right. Yes. Yes. Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay. 3 more questions. 2 more tough ones. There was a study this week that said global warming may be occurring more slowly than previously thought. What are your thoughts about climate change and, for example, the prospect in Canada that it may become illegal to become a climate change denier?
It's just another incredibly cynical attempt at fascism. It's just using the fact that most people haven't got a clue what's responsible for climate change to control populations. I mean, Ollie, what I would say is I do believe that there is some warming going on for a couple of reasons. I don't know if you know, but I've climbed Kilimanjaro quite a lot of times.
Yeah,
and from one year,
well done.
1 year to thank you. From 1 year to the next, I do notice a bit of deglaciation. I also tried to climb what's known as the Diamond Couloir on Mount Kenya, which is a pretty sheer piece of ice. And when I went to climb it, it had been in existence at least since the 19th century when it was photographed. It had disappeared, so it had melted. So there is some kind of warming going on. I just have tremendous difficulty believing that cows' flatulence and human activity are more likely to be responsible for it than solar activity and sunspots and little explosions. One little random explosion in the sun, from what I understand, can have massively more effect on temperatures in this country than lots of cows all flatulating all over the world.
Okay, all right.
But I'm not a scientist.
Yep.
That's just my impression. I just have tremendous difficulty believing the official version, and I think it's just a cynical attempt to manipulate populations to control them and to charge them double for using half the amount of energy.
Out of interest, do you know anything about hemp and the potential that would have in this debate as a way to, for example, insulate homes as an alternative to oil for fuel? You can even use it. Henry Ford used it to build the chassis on his cars. The Constitution was written on it. It's got loads and loads of uses. I just wondered, because it seems to me these folks, for example, at Paris, they get together around their canapes. They don't really discuss anything but how we can fleece the middle classes for more tax. It doesn't seem to be looking at actual, let's reduce, our carbon footprint. But I mean, for example, I don't know if you're aware, I'm just curious, do you know anything about hemp and the merits of that, for example, things that we should be looking at out of the box as opposed to what we're being told to do by big business?
I'm probably guilty of not having spent enough time researching it. So people have mentioned it to me. And but I mean, can I make a broader point, which is that I honestly don't believe that governments have a genuine interest in lowering our carbon footprint or all that kind of thing. I think it's a ploy, for us to pay carbon taxes and again to pay double for half the amount of energy that we consume. I think there are actually technologies that have been developed by enthusiasts in their garages, which if governments were genuinely interested in reducing our carbon footprint, they could have paid for them and developed them. I think probably what happens is big oil companies are probably buying this technology and deliberately suppressing it because it works against their interests. Last
question, John. Who would you support or serve of your co-bidders for the leadership? Who would you support and who would you not? Are there any circumstances under which you might leave UKIP?
Well, look, Olly, they're all good people. They're all sincere and all that kind of thing, and I mean that genuinely. But I cannot justify putting any more effort into raising the profile of a national party on the basis of policies that can easily be stolen by another political party and we get stripped down to nothing. The only way to advance the cause of democracy in this country, the only way to fight against the usurpation of democracy by the elites in this country is through direct democracy. So I would only support another candidate who sincerely were willing to implement direct democracy and to push for it at national level.
Okay, I'm just going to read a few closing statements because, a few closing remarks from a wonderful audience who's hung about, and cool, wonderful. Andy Good, FBI confiscated Nikola Tesla, his research papers when he died. Look that up if you're not sure about Tesla. There's Tesla Tech free energy which can't be metered. JC's brother got the brains, haha, says Neil Farrer. Climate change has and always will happen. Andy Good again. No, it doesn't. If she can argue like a geezer, she should expect to get spoken to. I don't know what that is. We have a world full of eminent scientists and politicians who insist we must believe in them. Don't make sense, does it? Says Chris Ford. Thank you very much. Is there anything in particular? Go on, Reece, go on.
If I may ask one more question. As leader of UKIP, what obviously I suppose we've briefly touched on it tonight, but there's a lot of fake news going around, to quote Trump, and the media can't be trusted. They're peddling the government's lies. And that's why there's other medias like the Daily Brexit, like Kipper Central, like Breitbart, and like various other sites and videos and live streams and all these things going on. As UKIP leader, how would you ensure that you and the party works with media like this more so that people hear real news, not fake news?
Yeah, good question.
Do you know, I've been asked this question in hustings, and my answer is that we immediately need to make a list of all potentially sympathetic news outlets like this, and we need to prioritize working with them. We also want to put out our own. One of my 5 proposals, I've got a 5-point plan. One of them is UKIP Media, which is a program whereby we will seize control of the agenda with clear, compelling messaging. So we will actually produce our own messaging. We'll produce our own high production value videos and whatnot, and we'll disseminate it all over social media, because now a majority of people, I think it's just over 50%, maybe within a certain age range, I mean, who knows, but many, many people are receiving their news primarily from social media, even ahead of mainstream media. So one, we're going to be creating our own content and putting it out there on social media, and 2, we're going to be identifying who are potentially sympathetic to at least listening to what we have to say, and we'll be prioritizing working with them. I mean, frankly, Olly, it is so refreshing to come on a show like yours and to talk about sensible things. I mean, it's so boring.
You didn't want to talk about the donkey then?
I mean, we can talk about the donkey if you like, but I mean...
No. To be honest with you, I completely hear what Reece says. I've heard what you say too. I completely agree with Trump about the whole fake news thing, although it's all over on both sides, including the sides that support him a lot of the time as well. I completely buy that, and it's just so frustrating. And when I see, for example, on Guido Fawkes, that they are constantly taunting you about some ridiculous story, I don't care if your donkey's gay. I don't think many people actually do. Sorry, I go on rants. John, carry on. You were complimenting me very beautifully.
Well, no, I mean, look, I honestly don't even read these things. People send me links and I say polite things to them, but I don't actually bother reading them because they're just complete nonsense. I mean, I came up with an idea for, well, yeah, it's basically an idea to stimulate jobs in other countries. And that was spun by some mainstream media outlets. In some ways, me being racist, you just cannot. You cannot possibly exaggerate the extent to which mainstream media deliberately distort in an overtly dishonest fashion what you say. I'm so fed up with them. It is so.
What would you do with the BBC?
Well, I mean, frankly, I don't even see the point of the BBC because they're not impartial. I'd probably want to get rid of them, but I mean that's obviously with the permission of the people. If the people want to retain
entirely, or BBC News.
Well, no. I mean, look, the idea of having a BBC is supposed to be devoid of any kind of commercial manipulation or influence. But the reality is it just happens from behind closed doors. I mean, commercial interest, vested interests have influence on politicians, and politicians really determine talking points, and these talking points are absolutely stuck to the letter by organizations like the BBC. As long as people understand what they're getting, that it is an overt kind of propaganda machine, no problem if the British people want it. If the British people want to retain the BBC, I would at least say that if they pay a license fee, they should get to vote on what actually appears. And if they don't like some of the agenda that the BBC are pushing, they vote against that and it doesn't happen.
Reece, anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree. And I think one example is the problems the other night where there were EU flags handed out, and instead of flying the British flag like they normally do, they flew the EU flag on the final night of the proms. And that, for me, just sums it up.
BBC
well,
News. John, go on.
Yeah,
You've got a minute. Carry on.
Is that I wanted to actually have a national campaign run by UKIP where we go throughout the country and we put pressure on everyone to get rid of any evidence of foreign invasion, get rid of every single EU flag that appears anywhere in this country.
I like that.
Love it.
Right, well, I'll tell you what, that was superb. Big cheers to my guest tonight, John Rees-Evans, candidate for leadership for UKIP. And all the candidates are welcome. You are all welcome. Come and give us your pitch. And indeed, Reece Coombes, two Reeces. Kipper Central. Yeah, good fun. Yeah, I enjoyed that. You've been tuned into the Daily Brexit. I'm Olly Connolly. Here's to us. And bugger plutocracy. Back tomorrow, 6 o'clock, BST. Yeah. And thank you for everybody in the comments. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. I need to write a proper outro, probably. John?
Yes.
If you win, will you come back on?
Oh, I'd be delighted, Ollie.
Oh, good. Hey.